I'll do a bit of an intro, Maurice, and then you're ready to start. Okay, great. Okay. Well, everybody, thank you all for joining us today for our Christmas party. So I think I wrote in a newsletter that's just come out that thank you to Maurice for saving our Christmas party because it wasn't going to happen. And we decided with the reduced number and no food allowed, it really wasn't much point in doing it. So we just canned that, and then having been in touch with Maurice and suddenly realized he was available in December, and we thought, what a great day, what are you doing on the 12th? And it's all just come together, which is great. So some of you who've come in today will have heard Maurice talking before, and he joined us last year, middle of the year, to give a talk on the ascendant, and which was fascinating. And so we were hoping he was going to be back in body this year, but it's turned out we've got him online, which is great. And Astrology as Church, we've just been chatting, has changed a lot this year in terms of how it's presented. But it's Zoom and GoToMeeting and other things that sort of kept us alive this year. Anyway, so Maurice, I was having a look at your website today, amazing amount of stuff on there, all these different courses and modules. It's nice how you split it up into different things where people are experienced astrologers can actually look on and say, you know, do a little module on the yard or on something things. And I'm sort of having watched that and interpreting the American election. It would have been good if I'd realized you had that before, because we might have got more insight into the yard because it was very prominent in the chart. Anyway, there you go. But look, it looked fascinating, all the different things you got available. And you must be recording things all the time. So, Maurice, today you've come back to us today and you're going to talk about the outer planets. So it's Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. Now, sorry, before I go into that, have you finished now? You've finished your 3 terms as the president of OPA. Are you continuing on, or somebody else take that on now? Or?
Yeah, I completed the president terms, so
yeah.
you know, the 3 terms, and I'm vice president now, so I'm still
right.
very involved.
Yeah.
But I have some more time for myself, just a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get you started. So today, everyone, Maurice Fernandez is talking to us from Arizona and USA. This is it's the first for New South Wales. We're holding a workshop online and also from USA. Quite amazing. So Maurice, it's great you can join us today, and Maurice will be talking on the outer planets. So with no further ado, I should pass it over to Maurice, and we'll have a bit of a chat later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for organizing this. I'm happy to be your astrology Santa Claus and to inspire, you know, more study and looking into both the natal position of these outer planets, which we can also refer to as transpersonal planets. And of course, we're also going to analyze how they have affected us collectively through transits. So before we really dive in, you know, Neil, you've been sharing some of the work on my website. I just want to quickly see if you would also be interested. You know, we have very powerful events coming up. Obviously, the Neptune book, you may already have it from when I was in Sydney last year, but otherwise you can order it and it's a local shipping cost. So if you want to know more about Neptune, speaking about outer planets, let me know. Perhaps you can order it online as well. As you know, this year is really still packed with dramatic transit. So coming up, we have an eclipse on Monday. I don't know if it's going to be also Monday in Australia or between Monday and Tuesday. But this eclipse at 23 degrees Sagittarius, and then the week following, we have the great conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn. And so we're going to lead an event that is going to involve both teaching material, master classes, and ceremony. Ceremony because, you know, as astrologers, it's important to bring a spiritual dimension to what we do, not just work intellectually or academically. So the ceremonial aspect of this event has to do with really, you know, we can call it a collective prayer. We can call it, you know, a setting of intentions, because it will determine the next 200 years for our civilization. So it's a big deal. So if you feel inspired, everything's going to be online and recorded. You can join from any place in the world. And next year, I'm having also some programs for Australia and New Zealand. We don't know if I will be able to come in person, but there is one online asteroid workshop that is scheduled for March, and it's going to be in your time zone. So we're going to review, you know, the main big asteroid Ceres, Juno, Vesta, Pallas, and Hygeia. And then in August, whether it's going to be in person or online, it's going to be a long 3-4 day workshop on Chiron and on medical astrology. So if you're interested, you know, go to my website or contact me. And to our topic, speaking today about the outer planet, the transpersonal planets. The reason I wanted to speak about them is because, well, they're fascinating, but also because they really are such a strong force in our lives. And so better understanding them helps us really make the best of these very powerful and sometimes potentially destructive forces. So the term outer planet is really a term that includes Jupiter and Saturn, but we're going to focus on the invisible outer planets and those considered transpersonal. So another thing that is, you know, quite often associated with outer planets, the transpersonal planet, is that they are the force of change in our lives. And it's very important to understand that, because change is a big word, and it's a very general word. So how does that really apply? What is the intention behind the change? You know, I'm an evolutionary astrologer, and from an evolutionary perspective, it's not enough to just say, well, this and this will happen. We want to understand the intention, because when you understand the intention, you are able to navigate things more gracefully. If I just say, you know, such and such will happen, and it's going to be a big change in your life, you won't necessarily be empowered. You know, you don't feel like you have a say. It's landing on you from whatever interpretation is made. So we do want to, you know, the purpose of this presentation is to really understand them individually. You know, what is Uranus, what is Pluto, what is Neptune, and then how they interact with each other. You know, cycles of Uranus, Neptune, cycles of Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune, Pluto, which are, you know, so important and so fascinating. In a way, you know, we need probably few days to cover all this, but we can start with the foundational principles. So when I say these are the forces of change, we need to understand that in the context of what are the other planets doing. When we look at the sun, moon, the luminaries, then we see the personal planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and they are also astronomically, naturally built of, different components. These are rocky planets. Venus, Mars, and Mercury are rocky planets, so they have greater density. Whereas Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are gas giants, gas planets. Jupiter and Saturn being the largest planets physically, followed by Uranus, Neptune in size. As you know, we can only with the naked eye, without the help of telescopes and equipment, we cannot see the planets beyond Saturn. Sometimes we can see Uranus, when it is opposing the sun. It's closer to the Earth, and we can visibly identify it. But otherwise, we only see as far as Saturn. So what does that mean, in our charts? The personal, the sun and the moon are basically your control center. That's where your individual consciousness makes choices, filters, everything you experience is filtered through the sun and the moon. So they basically represent how you as an individual, as a self, through your ego, how you process everything, how you respond to life. And it also represents what you retain, what is actually staying in your system versus what is not going to make it, what is not going to stay. So they are, they represent our emotional body, because everything in our lives has to be processed through emotions. The reason you retain certain things, you remember certain things, is because you feel them. Through your emotional body, you actually activate your memories. And that's how you integrate whatever you're going through. So let's say, we're going through this workshop. If you're only here through your mercurial function, then you'll take notes and you'll push the button and you'll do what you need to do. But you may forget it, once we're done. So the sun and the moon represent, if this really touches you, if this really affects you personally, and if it does, then it's going to be integrated. But otherwise, you can be indifferent, and then it passes through you. So, like I said, they are the control center, the processing center. Then we have Mercury, Venus, and Mars, representing our modes of action, our response mechanism, our senses, and they are part of our survival mechanism, the defense, resources, navigation. Mars, Mars is the ignition principle, the fact that you wake up every morning, that you stand on your own 2 feet, that you're able to have goals and go about them and make things happen in your life is part of that. And the ability to overcome any challenge, to make sure something will, that you will reach those goals. So Mars has to do with muscle tone and has to do with the ability to fend off predators and to get yourself going, to survive. Venus is all that's available to you, your resources. What do you have? You have a body, you have talents, you have land, all the things that represent your tool and your currency is in Venus. So that's why Venus has to do with self-worth, because what you have and who you are is part of your worth. If if we speak of Venus as the land, then what are you growing on your land and how can you sell it? So anything that you can trade is part of your Venus. Then Mercury is how you find your way in life. It's the learning process and data accumulation and the ability to absorb the impressions that are then filtered through the moon and sun. So Mercury is your mobility, it's your orientation, and the ability to make sense of life and to be able to learn, the building blocks of existence. So what keeps you sane and what keeps you organized, and your ability to schedule your day and to make sure things will be in place is Mercury. The fact that you don't have to learn every morning the same thing over and over, that you can retain things, is also part of Mercury and the moon. The moon is also the retaining principle. So what do we see is that with the sun, moon, and the three personal planets, you kind of establish yourself. You exist, and you have a sense of security, and you basically are able to survive, not just today, but through the week, through the month, through the year. You have what it takes. Then Saturn and Jupiter represent how you look at life on a more communal perspective, how everybody can come together and agree on certain things. So Jupiter and Saturn are the two big teachers of the zodiac, and they represent the rights and wrong. What we choose to do. They are our moral compass, and the teachers that will teach us not just how to read and write, but also make practical decisions, and then how to function in society. So you start to have the social planets, which take you beyond your own territory, to start cooperate more with others, to start working as teams, as a society, and to build systems. And the systems are built on our culture. So Saturn and Jupiter represent basically how we integrate in the larger context of a culture, not just us on our little farm, but how everybody's involved to make society going. And that's how we build systems and schools and governments and decide the rights and wrongs and what we agree on, and that helps us function. So in a way, up to from the moon all the way to Saturn, we're building. It's a brick above brick, and then we create structures, we create our lives. And in some ways, through trial and error and through what we say we agree upon, we develop ourselves progressively, linearly. So Saturn and Jupiter represents, you know, the larger goal. What do I want to do when I grow up? I want to be a pilot. I want to be, you know, a policeman. I want to be this and that. I want to be rich. I want to marry and have 5 kids. All these things that you know, the larger goals that I want to achieve, that basically my culture are also telling me, you know, this is right. If you have land and security, you're going to be happy. Or if you're married to a nice person, you'll be happy. So it gives us some reference to what may be good for us. And so the Saturn Jupiter in our chart represent those references to know what we may want for ourselves, based on what we've been educated, based on the conditioning of our culture. But the bottom line is that you're in a constructive mode. And if we were to stop with Jupiter Saturn, you know, from the sun, you would basically create that, you know, work hard, get a good job, reproduce, and grow old, and have your kids take care of you. Of course, you're going to have challenges, whether, you know, people are not going to like you, or maybe you're going to have a health crisis. All these things that happen that can challenge you are within that spectrum. But it's pretty established. And it's like we say, it's a goal we strive to accomplish. And that's how, you know, we have all kinds of plans for ourselves. Our retirement plan, our professional ambitions, and then what we are also going to pass on to our own children. Because the Jupiter Saturn is you becoming the teacher, you becoming the one who will lead the next generation. So that same tradition continues. And so in some ways, you know, if that was it, we would all live in our nice little home with white picket fence and nice Christmas decoration, and everything would be more or less predictable, more or less established. And we would repeat that over and over and over. Becoming better at it, you know, maybe we're going to build better houses and better picket fences, and, you know, expand our scope and our influence. It's part of development. But then when you speak about the outer planet, that's when basically everything is thrown into a big question mark. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto take us to a place that is beyond the scope of our existing framework, of our existing conditioning. So from Sun to Saturn, from Moon to Saturn, we're relying on security. You know, we want to be safe. We want to be healthy. We want to have, you know, productivity. We want to make sure our kids are safe. And we do everything to sustain that. Now, what gives you safety? Experience. You know, what did my elders do? And what has been taught through the ancestors? You know, the ancestors are very much Saturn, Jupiter. So there's great respect in every indigenous culture. You know, these are their big teachers. And now, you know, in December, they're going to come together. So there's a lot of work ceremoniously about reconnecting with our ancestors. But when we speak about Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, they are in place to shatter, to challenge our own conditioning. All our references need to be redefined and, revisited. Sometimes it's we're doing this willingly and consciously. And sometimes it happens to us where we are forced by life events to question everything, and it can happen through lust. So in a way, these invisible planets take us to an unpredictable place. It may not be completely unpredictable, because if the more you learn about them, and the more you can also anticipate what they're about and what the intentions are. So when I say, what are the intention of Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, who's deciding what the intentions are, right? Whose intentions? So from an astrological perspective, my premise, and I believe you share that too, is that the universe is an intelligent organism. And these planets are not just randomly shooting influences. I think part of astrology, reminds us and shows us how everything is, is not random. There's an intelligent thread that connects different events, that connects different influences. So when I say what are the intentions, I'm talking about what is the universe intending for life, for humanity, and beyond. So when we speak about change, we have to make a distinction between, I'm changing by selling my house and buying a new house. So I'm changing jobs. So the change can be very cosmetic. It can be external, and it can show an improvement. Maybe I'm going to have a better house. That's still part of the visible planets, because it's the same Maurice. He's maybe a little taller now, and he's maybe a little grayer now, but it's the same thread of Maurice, just changing location because it's part of his development. When we speak about Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto changes, we speak about a change in your consciousness, where something about your fundamental values, your whole references, can be completely redefined. And this is why sometimes this can translate into, you're not the same person you used to be. You're making different choices. It's an interesting concept. Like, I remember a while back, I went to a high school reunion, and I met people I had not seen for 20 years at the time. Was it 20 or 30 years? And it was so shocking to see that all the people had, those that I interacted with, what I can see is very few had really changed. I could almost hear the same sentences that they had when they were teenagers. The same mischievousness, the same sarcasm, the same, values. And, they just, like I said, they were older, and they had now little versions of themselves children and families, but they had not evolved. Some did, and some didn't. But that's the work of Uranus, Pluto, Neptune, is that something changes inside of you where it completely breaks patterns. And it can help you make, better choices for yourself. So that's what we're talking about, the change that affects your consciousness. And that can happen through physical events, emotional events, even mental events, or spiritual events. Whatever the trigger is going to be, the purpose is to expand your consciousness. So the consciousness, see it as a cup, just like you would see the Holy Grail, your Holy Grail. And so your consciousness is that container. And that container is your Saturn, Jupiter. That's your established consciousness, your conditioning, your rights and wrongs, and everything that you believe in, everything that you work for. The reason why you go to war, is in that container of Saturn, Jupiter. And then the outer planets are trying to remodel your container. Uranus is what will actually fill your container, because Uranus represents awareness, the very fact that you can be aware, that you can be awakened. Everything that you know, and I mean that not just on a practical level where you know where your keys are and you know how to turn the stove on. These are mercurial knowledge, the know how to. But Uranus represents the knowledge about why you're here, the more spiritually conscious, and how things are connected. So Uranus really can represent what is going to fill that container of yours. However, Uranus wants, just like you see, Uranus is the sky god, and Uranus, is the modern ruler of Aquarius. You see the symbol of Aquarius is pouring the waters from the heavens, from the sky. So in a way, Uranus is expecting your container to be able to hold that. And Uranus says there's more you need to know, and there's more you can be conscious of, and there's more awareness waiting for you. But what happens if your container is full? It's going to overflow, and it's not going to be assimilated. It's not going to be integrated. So it won't filter down to your sun, moon to be, to get to the control room. It's going to be lost. It's going to evaporate or drip. So from a Uranus point of view, it's like, get yourself a bigger container, please. You need to keep growing. And there's a sense of impatience about that. So what happens when your container is full? Imagine that you're going to someone on the street and you tell them, there's a Pluto-Saturn conjunction that is going to completely alter the structure of society. And that person has no knowledge of astrology vocabulary, and they don't understand what you mean Pluto Saturn are together. They can't compute that because they haven't been trained, because it won't make any sense to them. So that's part of that container overflowing. There's nothing to hold the information you're going to deliver. And I'm using, a graphic example where someone doesn't actually speak the language. But even if you can say that to, in a human language, not using astrology term, and you're going to tell them, this is a year where we're going to have to expose corruption, and we're going to there is going to be a great deal of destruction, because destruction can serve as a purpose of building new foundations. Even if you say that, they may say, no, don't destroy anything. Keep everything the way it is, because that's how I'm used to. So they're going to freak out because you tell them that. So that's also some kind of information that they cannot really use, because their container is not formed to absorb that download. And so you have the red alert, memory full, can't get any additional folder in that container. Neptune and Pluto, to some, in a different way, drain the container. Neptune says everything you know is against you. I need to clean your slate. I need to empty your vessel so that you can learn something of a higher frequency. So it doesn't mean that you're starting from scratch and you're learning to walk and talk again. You have those basic capacities. They stay with you, but you are you're first of all draining, there's a purging effect with Neptune. You're draining all the ideas, ideals, references, your rights and wrong. Suddenly nothing can make sense to you when you have a strong Neptunian activation. And the term that you can experience with Neptune is a void. I'm in a void. My marriage doesn't make sense anymore. I have no motivation to go to work anymore. And so you freak out because you don't have direction. And the things you used to like don't mean anything to you anymore. So that's part of what Neptune can bring. Then what Pluto does is actually destroying the actual vessel in order to rebuild it. So, it's coming with a bulldozer, it's coming with hammers, and really coming to deconstruct, radical destruction. The purpose is, of course, to build a stronger one, a bigger one, that, one that Uranus will be happier with, because it's going to be more profound and deeper and wider. And that basically works on your consciousness. So this gives you basic preview. We're going to get more in details about all of that. But that's what I want to highlight in those examples, is to make you understand the difference between the visible planets and those that are not. They work on a more spiritual, psychological level. And if everything about the visible planet was about building and about security and development, make a distinction between development and evolution. Development is when you have a child, a baby, who becomes a child, who becomes an adolescent and a young adult. And so there's a linear progression. You develop yourself, you go to school, you get a degree, you do the things that you're maturing into the adult within you. And then you're aging, and that's also part of your development. So that's development, whereas evolution is when your consciousness changes. And that doesn't have anything to do with your age, doesn't have anything to do with the physical circumstances. You can have young people who are very evolved, and you can have older people who are not. But Uranus, Neptune, Pluto work on evolution. And evolution means you're expanding your consciousness. And what is consciousness? Where are you going with that? What are you becoming conscious of? What is this awareness about? All I need to know is how to build a house, how to cook food, and how to take care of my crops. What is this consciousness business? So the function of consciousness is to learn more about life and the truth. The truth that governs everything. The truth that is not just about now, what's happening in Australia today, what's happening in the United States today, but the truth that is true for all of us at all times. Why is there a pandemic? Why are there 5 continents? Why are there wars? Why do we need marriages? The deep and casual existential question, why are we born? Why do we wake up every morning? Why do we want to survive? Why do I work so hard to stay healthy? So from a visible planet point of view, you do all that because it gives you security and it gives you some gratification. I have a good meal, I'm happy. I had good sex, I'm happy. I bought something, a beautiful dress, I'm happy. So it gives you those immediate gratifications that keep you going, and you want a little, another dress, and you want another house. And that keeps you going. But Uranus, Neptune, Pluto is, why in the first place do you want that dress? What is the meaning of this dress? And why are you facing rejection? So it's the bigger question. It's the big picture perspective that goes beyond your culture, goes beyond, 2020, and it touches the deeper meanings of life. And so there's constantly a new layer to peel and to peel and to try to get to deeper answers and to see how the different things are connected. We're not just connected through Zoom, we're connected through life. You're maybe out there in Australia, and I'm maybe up here in the States, but we share the same truth. And that's what these outer planets want to get to. So some technical references, Uranus stays 7 years in a sign and 84 years for a complete revolution. So age 84, you have a Uranus return. Now, 7 years in a sign, if we jump to Neptune, Neptune stays 14 years in a sign, and a full revolution is 165 years. So your Neptune moves twice as fast as Uranus. Excuse me, Uranus moves twice as fast as Neptune. So they are 2-to-1 cycle. Basically, Neptune takes twice as long to do the same. Pluto's orbit is is highly irregular. It's elliptical. So Pluto can stay 11 years in a sign, as it was in Scorpio. It's only stayed 11 years in Scorpio, up to 30 plus years in a sign, usually Taurus. The full cycle is 248. I also put here the modern rulers. Uranus rules Aquarius, Pluto, Scorpio, and Neptune, Pisces. And to me, that's undeniable as far as research goes. I know that some people, question why, but as far as I can see relations and rulership with signs, it would be very limiting to disregard the rulership. So what does that mean, in our lives, and where do we go from there? If you look at the time, that Pluto is moving the fastest, it stays 11 years in Scorpio. It actually goes faster than Neptune. So that's a time, there's a 20-year range when Pluto enters Neptune's orbit and gets closer to the sun than Neptune is, which is interesting because what happens, we said nothing happens randomly. There's an intelligent universe, so we can understand the astronomy of it. But what does that mean spiritually, emotionally? Let's explore. Just some more characteristics about Uranus. It was discovered, these outer planets were discovered in the recent centuries. Uranus was in 1781, which coincided with many events that changed the world, whether it was the heart of the Industrial Revolution, which, the foundation of the United States, and the French Revolution. And interestingly, I wrote Mozart's active years because he's an Aquarius, and he was right there when Uranus was discovered, and that genius is definitely captured in his music and being so precautious. So what is Uranus? When you ask astrologers, there's a go-to phrase. We each have our own Saturn, Jupiter inner teacher and inner conditioning, and we need those references. So if I'm looking at a chart and I see Uranus or I see a transit, usually you'll see people say, sudden change, sudden change. But we don't understand, what does that mean, sudden change? And why is it sudden? And what is the intention of the change? So when we look at Uranus, one of the functions of Uranus ruling the sign of Aquarius, it represents the higher mind. The higher mind is the part in you that knows. That knows, doesn't always want to listen, but you know. You know your marriage, is not working. You know that you are not really finding meaning in your life. You know there's more to life than this. You can't always do something about it, but it's Uranus gives you the, as the ruler of Aquarius, what it wants you to do is to detach from your emotions. So Uranus wants to move away from the sun moon, wants to detach from the emotions and lift you up to look at your life from above, so that you will see and become further aware of who you are and your context. So Uranus, by definition, has to do with elevation, literally going up. The motion going up is important. You know, we speak about Uranus related to aviation and to space exploration, which, you know, have to do with elevation. Also skyscrapers, very Uranian energy. But what is it about going up? Going up has to do with ascension, the ascension to your higher self. Uranus also rules the brain, which is the highest organ physically in your body. People with strong Uranus often can be tall and thin. In Ayurveda, is kind of Vata type people. But whether you're short or tall doesn't matter. You have Uranus in your chart, and the purpose is to rise above. And the reason you want to rise above is that you want to look at things as objectively as possible. The more you're down, the more you are in your emotional body, and therefore the more you are consumed by your daily affairs. So that's very necessary, but it's not what Uranus wants you to do. Because Uranus says, gosh, there's so much more you can know and understand and figure out. You are just, you know, touching the tip of the iceberg. If we look at the order, you know, of the planets, Uranus is between Saturn and Neptune. You know, here I put Pluto in the center, but there's another reason for that. But as far as the actual order of in the sky, Saturn, you know, precedes Uranus and is followed by Neptune and then Pluto. By sign, Uranus rules Aquarius, which is between Capricorn and Pisces. And if we quickly relate to Pisces and Neptune as the spiritual principle and Saturn as the material principle, so Uranus is the bridge between the material and the spiritual. So one of the great things about Uranus is that it connects the hard sciences of Saturn with the spiritual knowledge of Neptune. And that's why Uranian people have that touch of genius, because they connect these two worlds. They can function in the material world, but they can also intuit what is beyond the material world. And so they constantly download knowledge. And that's what Uranus is doing, is a constant downloading of information. That's why you want a vessel that's big enough. On the other hand, you know, if you look at Neptune, Neptune represents the spiritual principle, but Neptune doesn't always know how to function in the material world. You know, Neptunian people are lost in this world. They're not interested in money, and they're not interested in competition, and they're not interested in gravity. Whereas Uranus knows how to handle both. And that's what makes it powerful in its own right. So what is the purpose of all this? Think again, big picture perspective. Uranus wants to take you to that eagle eye perspective. And this is why Uranian people have sharp vision. It's like the eagle who can be very high in the sky, but can spot the details on the surface of the earth. And that's literally sometimes, we can refer to that anatomically. Aquarian people have good vision. Leos have poor vision. Leos wear glasses very early on. I'm, of course, generalizing, but you'll see Leos often struggle with eyesight. And that's because it's the opposite. When you're Leonian, you're so emotionally involved that you don't always see things clearly. So Uranus is the mechanism of detachment from emotions so that you can rise above. And why do you need to go above? What's above? Why do you need to live on the top floor of the skyscraper? What happens when you're on a plane and you look at the earth? Perspective, clarity. You have a view. And that's exactly what you're going to sell to, if you're a real estate agent and you want to sell an apartment to an Aquarian Uranian person, they need a view. Because the higher you are, the more global your view is going to be. And that's what your consciousness wants. Because what did we say is the purpose of Uranus and the outer planet? I want the truth. I want to understand. And down here, and when I'm on the ground and on the floor, there's so much I can see. It's denser. I cannot see beyond the tree line. I cannot see beyond the skyline. So the higher I go, the farther I can see. And that gives me information, gives me understanding, and helps me better understand life. So when you have a Uranus transit, you can have that illumination. The lightning strike. Suddenly in the dark, you see. Let's say you have a Uranus transit on your Venus. What happens? What do you think? I'm going to engage you a little bit. If you have a Uranus transit, what can you expect will happen from what I've just described?
So if anyone wants to make a comment, if you just unmute your mic, and I'll keep an eye on the little box and just say, okay, speak.
Well, I can see the comments, so I can read them. So Anne says, suddenly see clearly what's my real worth. Right. What else could happen? Love affairs. Why do you say that, Rosemary? Why would Uranus bring a love affair? Or affairs in the plural? Sudden love interest. We want to go to the why. Again, these are keywords that we often use with Uranus, sudden. But why are they sudden? And why is it a love interest? What's the intention? What's the motivation? What's the evolutionary reason behind it? Truth about our relationships, exactly. So when Uranus hits our Venus, we're suddenly getting out of our routine, you know, the things we do mechanically, go to work, feed the kids, pay the bills, you know, plan the vacation, all the things that you're used to that are part of your security. Suddenly you're lifted from your own self, from your own life, and you look at your marriage and you look at your value and you see, well, is this relationship really truthful to me? Is this relationship really meaningful to me? Or am I just going and following the motion? So you suddenly have a realization and you see something and you cannot unsee it. You have a download, you have a realization. You realize that maybe your marriage is great and you want to take it to the next level. Or you realize there's lack. Why? Because one of the things that Uranus wants to bring as it elevates and as it gives you perspective, it says, we can go higher. Look how high we can go. I don't want to settle for this. So immediately as you gain perspective, not only do you have insight into what's going on in your life, but you also realize you want more. So we want to expand the vessel. There's a download here that has to do with my relationships. Now, this can sometimes happen naturally where you take time off and you take time to think. You know, one of the things you want to advise yourself or your client when you have a Uranus transit is go somewhere else. Take a distance from your own life. You know, spend time in the woods, spend time in another country, spend time somewhere else. Detach from the routine. Break a pattern. And you can reflect on things. So that aspect of reflection is important. And then you come to understanding and realizations. So you can realize that something's lacking and you want to elevate your relationship because that whatever Uranus touches, it wants to elevate. So if the relationship cannot go any higher, if your partner, you know, is not ready to make any change and feels like, you know, my routine and watching my TV shows and, you know, I don't want to push the envelope. I don't want to challenge myself. I don't want to learn new things. I'm safe the way I am. Then you're going to feel very frustrated, and that can lead to love affairs. That can lead to suddenly feeling losing interest. That's what happens with Uranus because Uranus works with the brain, it works with the mind, and the mind needs stimulation. I need the next level. I need a higher perspective. So if you can't provide Uranus with the next level, you're going to have a crisis. And the crisis begins with losing interest. I don't like this person anymore. I don't know how I was married to them. So it doesn't have to be a physical, you know, drama. Actually, Uranus is very undramatic in some ways because it's just a detachment. Oof, you're not there anymore. So you come back to the relationship and you're there physically, but you're not there emotionally because you made a step forward and your partner hasn't. So you give them a chance, so you're patient and you're waiting, but nothing happens and there's no one home and they don't want to change. And so you start to feel restless, and you can definitely become more attracted to someone else who will meet you there, who will suddenly excite your mind again and share those perspectives, and is someone who will pull you up rather than drag you down. Like, that's the last thing you want with Uranus, is to be dragged down. I want to be pulled up. So when you become a witness to your own life, you have that download, that aha moment, that realization. Like I said, you cannot undo it. You cannot unsee it. Now, in other instances, this can happen through an unexpected event. Let's say you were in your relationship and you had a good, you thought you were happy, that everything was in place. Then you realize, as with the Uranus transit, you find out because someone pulled you up and told you to look at your life, look at your relationship from that vantage point. And you see that your partner is having an affair. Wait a minute. Everything I knew, everything I relied on, everything I thought was true is suddenly in question. So it's not just you having an affair, it could be that you find out that your partner is not there with you. And it's just an example, of course. What's the intention? Because if you speak to your client, you can't just say, well, you're going to have an affair, Uranus on your Venus. You need to explain what's actually happening emotionally, spiritually. The way to describe it is, my friend, this is time now to raise the bar in your relationships. This is time where you're gonna feel the need for more. You're gonna want to go deeper, maybe expand through relationships. Maybe it's time to meet new people, not sexually, socially. This can be a time where you meet interesting people that can teach you something. Or it could be that with your partner, you are going on an adventure. You are going to a workshop together and you're going to learn new things that will help you. But the bottom line, the intention, is that Uranus says, enough of what you've done up to now. Take it a step higher. And then, if nothing happens, you have crisis. So getting that bird eye view can be something you choose to do, or it can be something that you are forced to do. Now, Uranus is, why do we need to go up? Why do we need to learn more? What's the real desire or intention behind Uranus? Is to find solutions. The more we know, the more we understand, the more we can solve pain. So Uranus is looking at people, looking at life, and says, there are solutions. Why are people repeating the same mistakes over and over? Why do they keep going to war when it's such a waste of life and waste of money? It's, in a very Uranian way, a very Uranian word is like, oh my God, this is so stupid. And that's how Aquarian people can look at civilization and say, gosh, we're so far behind. Like, we're not getting it. I don't want to be part of this. So when you have that vantage point and you see things from a distance, then you come down, it all looks so limited. But the purpose is to come down, is to come back to Saturn and to bring those new ideas, those new concepts, once your container, can absorb that. Because the real purpose of Aquarius and Uranus is to advance civilization. What we want to do through this archetype is to move to the next level. So what does that mean to advance civilization? Not just advance one person, not just your marriage, but to advance all our systems, to elevate the standards of life. For example, this can happen through technology, where you have new inventions, new cures, science, finds treatments for cancer, or you have the smartphones that let you do things very quickly, and you can connect everywhere with just a little device in your hand. So, but the other thing that Uranus really wants to do is to raise the standards of living. If you go back to the Industrial Revolution and the machines, what were the machines doing? They were be able to perform tasks faster and more efficiently than what humans could do with their heads. So it's better tools. How do you advance civilization? You have to advance everybody. Now, there's a paradox with Uranus. And the paradox is that Uranus is, on the one hand, striving to bring equality, and at the same time, it creates elitism. Why? Because if you go up and you go to the brain, or you go to the skyscraper, or you go to the higher echelon, you're smarter, you're more advanced. How do you feel about the commoners? How do you feel about the people who lead simple lives? Uranus can feel that they're backwards, that they're detached. So there can be elitism. I'm more advanced, I'm more intelligent, I'm in the next step, and you are behind. So it actually doesn't bring equality at all. It actually creates social classes. But because the intention is to raise the standards of life, what Uranus tries to do is to elevate the minimum standard. So a Uranian parent, let's say you have Uranus in your 5th house, and the 5th house has to do with children. So Uranus in the 5th, you're going to, strive to elevate the way you parent your children. You're going to be more conscious of it. You're going to be more aware. You're not just going to, use corporal punishment. You're going to read Steiner's book about the best way to enhance the children's creativity. And you're going to do research about listening to Mozart music when you're pregnant, so that the child, is in tune with these finer vibrations. You're going to, teach them Greek when they're 2 years old, because that's when the brain is the most active. So you're going to do all this research and all these advanced techniques and, take them to Waldorf schools because you want to bring the highest, the best, the most refined, the most sophisticated, the most progressive qualities to raising your children. So then you're going to look at the public schools and what, the mainstream is doing, and you're going to say like, oh my God, no wonder their kids are miserable. So there can be a level of arrogance in that progressive approach. However, the deeper intention of Uranus is so that even in the public schools, we're going to integrate these new models. Maybe we're going to have a computer for every child. To begin with, let's make sure every child goes to school. That's civilization in progress. Let's make sure girls go to school. Let's make sure they don't drop out at 12 to go work in the field, but they actually complete 12 years. All these is tremendous effort and a lot of reorganization because we want to advance life. So Uranus says we need to move to a more refined, to a higher level. And of course, we know today so much Aquarian energy. We see AI and we see development, of technology, but it's like I said, it's not only measured in technology, it's also measured in human rights. Every kid can go to school. Every kid deserves to be loved. Every kid deserves, proper hygiene and health care. No kids deserve to be abused. All these conditions are part of the Uranus effort. But how do you measure the success of Uranus is not only if your kids, have Mozart music. The success is measured if that's implemented on a global scale. And that these standards can be elevated at a minimum level. What Uranus wants, what do you gain as you go higher up? Think about altitude. Think about an airplane. Why do planes try to fly higher and higher and higher? What do you gain with altitude? Robert, remind me of Jackie Wilson. Lift me up, yeah. Anne says, good question, less traffic, efficient flight. Well, obviously you have less gravity, and you have less friction. So the higher you go, the faster you can go. And that's a key word for Uranus, speed. Whatever Uranus touches in your chart, it accelerates. Uranian people love speed and fast cars and, things that, and of course they cannot do with a slow computer. They need a fast computer. Why is speed important? Because the faster you go, the more you can do. Think about, again, a computer that's very slow. It's going to take ages to process just a simple equation. If we can mute everyone. So speed is very important for Uranus because speed allows for greater gain, shorter investment of resources. So again, if you can mute yourselves, Gaia and everyone. So going back to speed is going to be critical for the Uranus process, because just like a computer, if the computer can process things faster, then you can do more things. And it's not just about more, but it's also more complex. You know, if a computer can go faster, it can do more complex equations. It can penetrate new realms that at a slow speed you could not penetrate. You know, we can go deeper into space if we are able to go faster. And who knows what we're going to discover. And that's why also Uranus tries to detach from emotion, because emotions are slowing you down, for better and worse. So now let's explore, based on speed, what happens if you have Uranus Moon aspect. What can you expect then? What kind of events? What kind of adjustment? What's the intention? Impatient with emotions. So you're going through a change in a very personal and intimate space. The intention of Uranus is to actually upgrade, use the word upgrade for Uranus, upgrade your emotions, your family life. And what happens when Uranus crosses your moon? Maybe you have an emotional event. Let's say, in a simple way, you lose your job. It's in the 6th house. Moon on your Uranus on your moon. You lose your job. What is the moon response? The moon is going to say, oh my God, I'm so devastated. I love my colleagues. What am I going to do? How am I going to feed my family? I don't know, what's coming next. So the moon gets into an emotional state, because that's how the moon needs to work. The moon needs to process things emotionally. I need to sit with it. I need to chew on it. I need to talk to my psychologist. I need to talk to my mother about it. So I lost my job, and that's what they did, and it wasn't fair, and I'm gonna talk to my colleagues about it. And so there's a lot of processing, talking, adjusting, adapting. And Uranus is like, why waste your time on all these emotions? You're going to get a better job. Move on. So Uranus lifts you up from the mud, from this constant processing, and says, look, I'm lifting you up from above. Get perspective. This job was actually making you sick. It's high time for you to get another job. And it's going to be better, and you should ask for more and elevate your conditions. So what do we see Emotions are slow. Emotions need time to adjust. Uranus doesn't have the time. There's so much more to do. Press enter, you'll get a new job. So what we can, is it, and now my question is it a good thing or is it not a good thing? What's happening here? You'll see some Uranian influenced people who may go through a crisis. Their boyfriend dumped them, they were fired from their job. They move on. Next, no problem. I understand it. What are they going to tell their boyfriend or their girlfriend? I understand why you had to leave me. I understand you were in a different place. So Uranus is civilized. It's understanding. It's aware. I'm not going to sue you. It's not going to lead to anything. Let's just talk about the best way to manage our custody of the kids, and we're going to make this work for everybody, and I'm going to move on. So it's a very enlightened, reasonable approach. And it's great. Everybody can get along, and there's no fight, and there's no mud, and there's no drama. However, what's the danger? What do you think we risk here? Yeah, we rationalize emotions and security. Is that a good thing? What's the danger? We can see there are gains to that. Loss of community? Not necessarily. You could still have your community. You can increase your community. But what can happen? Exactly. Have you really processed that emotion? Loss of engagement can, and spiritual bypass, exactly. What can happen with Uranus is that in your attempt to find solutions, to resolve problems, you don't really process things because you detached and you glided above and you flew over the problem. And so you can get to very advanced places, but you never were in touch with the pain. You did not integrate. Remember, you have a sun moon for a reason. The sun moon are your processes. And if you skip them too quickly, it's not retained. It's not absorbed. So the lessons are not learned. And you can have the concept of spiritual bypass is, you can have a lot of knowledge, but you're not really good at life. So the risk of Uranus is that the speed overwhelms your own natural rhythm, your own organic rhythm. So it can be, if you're born with the moon Uranus, maybe your mom rationalizes your pain. And when you come with a boo-boo because you fell on your knees and you're bleeding, she's going to say, well, scientifically speaking, you're going to heal in 34 hours, and it's not a big deal. So there's no cuddling, there's no comforting. We're not interested in security. We're interested in the cold truth. And she may mean very well, but there can be a disconnect with the emotional processing. It's hijacked. So that's why we still need our personal planet. But there's another player that comes into the picture. And we're going to talk about that after the break. But let's look at some of these illustrations. You know, obviously, skies and anything that's high is Uranus. Also, Uranus has to do with team, working together. Because what happens when you have a team is you can connect your brain. It's what we call brainstorming. Very Uranian words. And, you know, you see the curves here. Uranus has a lot to do with, you know, the compass and the ruler. Making circles, creating circulation and angles. And of course, you know, relativity of time and the speed factor. So it's 40 now past the hour. Let's come back at past 5. Is that okay?
Oops. Sounds good.
All right.
Okay. Okay, everyone. Time to do a little bit stretch, grab a drink of water, do what we have to do. If you want to turn your camera on and mic on, feel free. I'm just going to be off at the moment because I'm desperate for a glass of water.
Can you hear me?
Whoops. Yep. Yep. You're coming through.
All right.
And we've got your screen and your camera's on.
So we move to Pluto. We skip Neptune for a moment. Any question before we move forward? Okay. You'll be tested at the end of this, so you better know everything. So the reason I'm moving to Pluto, because Pluto is also involved in this radical change. And we said, as Uranus wants to fill our vessel and bring new content and upgrade everything about who we are and how far we can go, Pluto is actually the architect rebuilding the vessel to adapt to the new content. So it's a constant work to reshape our own consciousness, because we know we want to get to the point where we're able to get new information without overflowing, get new consciousness without overflowing. So how does that work? If we went back to what I was describing, you know, you go on the street and you speak to someone and you share with them some, you know, philosophical content that they're not prepared for, that they have no reference for, they will feel lost. So how do you prepare them? How do you build a person to get to the point where suddenly things become clear and they can really integrate what is being transmitted or what they experience or whatever realizations come through? So let's explore Pluto, modern ruler of Scorpio, named after the god of the underworld, discovered in 1930 in an observatory right next door to me. I often visit that observatory. And unfortunately, because of COVID, we can't go there and watch Saturn, Uranus, and Mars. But that's where it is. It's right close to where I am. And as you know, during the 30s was a very, very intense time on the planet, similar to now, where there was a great economic depression, and it was the rise of Nazi Germany and Hitler, which led to serious deconstruction and destruction for the purpose, to eventually rebuild a new Europe and new infrastructure. So what happened during those years? Pluto represents the shadow work. Ruling Scorpio, ruling the 8th house, associated with the underworld. What is this underworld about? So think about it as, if you look physically, the underworld is what is really below the surface, all the crevices of the world, of life, of Earth. And that's actually where everything is seeded. I'm going to have this talk about asteroids in March, and we're going to talk about the asteroid Ceres, who represents agriculture and nurturing and motherhood. But Ceres, has a whole complex relationship with Pluto. If you remember the myth, her daughter was abducted by Pluto, and she went through a whole emotional process trying to bring her back. But if we look at the deeper implications, if you want to grow food, whether it's potatoes under the surface or whether it's coconut way up there, you need the underworld. That's where all the nutrients are coming from. So the underworld that is not visible is really the source, the composting of all the debris and the destruction and death that is being recycled into nutrients that will eventually, feed the crop, nourish the crop that will sustain us on the surface. So for Ceres to grow her food and to feed the world, she actually needs Pluto. But Pluto, is under there. Nobody pays attention. Nobody remembers him because we don't, far from sight, you don't remember them. That's why Pluto can be so angry and so dramatic, because we take him for granted, because we forget that he's actually the one providing the nutrients. And we only, are happy when we collect the fruit. We don't source it to the underworld. Most importantly, whatever is in the underworld, if it's good, it can be good nutrients if you have good soil. But if it's not good, then nothing's going to grow. And that's part of what we need to do with our own lives, is to go to our underworld, to go to the sewage pipes and see if there's any clogging, if everything, circulates properly, and look at the foundations of things. So in that sense, Pluto represents also the expansion of awareness and realizing, the hidden truths, the things that we took for granted, the things that we didn't want to look at because it doesn't smell so good, it doesn't look so good. Pluto is not pretty, and it's not comfortable, and so we don't want to deal with it, certainly not on a daily basis. And yet, without it, nothing is going to work. So the shadow work, is about looking at all the blockages, all the insecurities that we don't pay attention to, but they do govern our habits, our instincts. If you feel rejected and you never dealt with that, and that fear of rejection is constantly under the surface, it's going to create all kinds of behavioral patterns to compensate for that, or to find some security despite that. So it ends up poisoning your life, and you're not fully aware why things don't work out, why your relationships are constantly failing. And so you call Dr. Pluto to find out what's really happening there. So shadow work is basically looking at the things that are not visible, but that have tremendous grip on everything we do and everything we decide and our sense of power. This is why Pluto is immediately related to therapy, because it relates to the ability to discuss those inner emotions, those difficult emotions. And ultimately, as we overcome, as we go through our therapy process, what is the ultimate intention of Pluto? If Uranus was about elevation and the expansion of consciousness and bringing new insight, new realization, Pluto is very foundational. It has to do with clearing the clogs, with cleaning our vessel and restructuring it, and destroying and restructuring it, so that we may go deeper, so we may go higher. One of the feelings that Pluto provides is power. We feel empowered when we have a positive Plutonian experience. The sense of renewal is tremendous. And what is power? How can we quantify it or define it? Power is immediately related to choice. The more power you have, the more choices you have. And it's immediately related to magnetism. What you want to attract and what you want to eliminate and reject. If you choose what you want for your life and you are able to push away the things you don't want, you're in a good place. So some people say money is power, because when you have a lot of money, you can choose, this house and that vacation, and you have privileges, you have more freedom of action. Some people will say, well, it's social position, because when you have status, you can make decisions, you have more choice. Some people say it's intelligence, because the smarter you are, the more choice you can have. And so we all have our association with what is power to us. And Pluto wants more of it, because the more choice you have, the better your life can be. But the way Pluto works is that in order for you to get that power, you first of all have to face your limitations. You have to face anything that's between you and that sense of power and that greater choice. And this is where the shadow works, where you have to go to those inconvenient places and face this inconvenient truth. So Pluto takes you down into the rabbit hole, into the tunnels of your own psyche and your own life. And by going down, like we said, you work on the foundations. You work on your grief and healing. And basically, you work on all the limitations, the things that are unresolved, the limitations of your beliefs, the limitations of your anxiety, of your neurosis, of your poverty. You know, we talked about wealth is going to give you power. You know, with Pluto transit, you can feel like you're so poor. You can't pay your bills. You can't do a thing. You can't afford your astrology classes. So that's one thing. Another thing that Pluto, you know, can make you feel as you face your limitation is that you're fired. You know, you lose your job. You're not chosen. You know, they picked somebody else. And maybe you're not beautiful enough. And so you know, your girlfriend rejects you. So rejection is a very Plutonian experience, because rejection immediately exposes you to your limitations. You know, why did she not love me? Why is it in me that is not attractive? What is it in me that, you know, didn't have them pick me for the job? So you facing your lack, your limitation, and obviously it destroys your self-esteem. Now think of the polarity of Scorpio is Taurus. Taurus has to do with your self-esteem, with value. So Pluto kind of makes you feel like your value is very low, and you can suffer that kind of feeling of limitations. You thought you were fine, but nobody wants to work with you. And that's what happened in Nazi Germany. I mean, Germany was in a decline after the First World War. You know, the economy was bad. Everything was really at a very low point. And then, you know, Hitler promised power, promised to do the purging and to, you know, make Germany powerful again. So very Plutonian. The problem is that, you know, he did that in destructive means. You know, Pluto doesn't have to be manipulative. It's one side of the Plutonian process. But Pluto does invariably make you feel small, make you feel disempowered, make you feel like a loser to a degree or another. It exposes you to your blind spots. And once you acknowledge that, you know, if you're in that place of Germany after the war, and you feel destitute, you have the choice. Am I going to reclaim my power through war and through racism and, you know, and hatred, or am I actually going to create new industry? I'm going to be creative and I'm going to reclaim my power through positive values. That's a choice in itself. So you're going to have those Plutonian people, Scorpionic people who have this very low self-esteem, and you know their girlfriend dumps them, and they're you know they think that the way to get her back is going to be to threaten her, or to, you know, to be manipulative and to lie to her and make false promises. So that's a compensation mechanism. You know, that's trying to survive the day because you feel so small. But in a positive way, it can be that, you know, you're going to work on yourself. You're going to get a better job. You're going to stop drinking. You're going to get an education. You're going to do all these things that will improve your value, that will help you overcome your limitations. And so this Pluto transit is kind of a wake-up call, because you realize there's work to be done. But if you do the work, what is the gain? Is that you're not just going up back to where you started, you're going higher. So what does that remind you of? We talked about Uranus going higher, wanting to go higher because that's where you see things and that's where you go faster. And what are we saying with Pluto? Pluto's going down. Uranus is going up. But Pluto says, before you go up, you need to go down. And that's a very important key. Because if you go up without going down, you risk crashing. Let's look at this illustration. Pluto is the roots of the tree, and the roots are a perfect mirror to the branches. You know, when you want to water a tree, you have to water as far wide as the branches go. That's the root system. So if you don't do your Pluto work and you don't have an effective root system, you know, you may go up and up to the sun and want to, you know, go higher and higher, but you have no foundation. You're going to crash. The same thing with the triangles. You know, you have the triangle going down, which is the triangle of incarnation. You come down into flesh. You come down into the material world. You come down to the density of this dimension. And only after you've come down and integrated in the material world can you then go up again. Now think about this on a chakra system. Uranus represents the third eye, you know, the vision and the truth and the ability to see beyond bias. You know, your two eyes are your sun and moon. That's what you see through your filters, through your emotions. But the third eye sees beyond. That's the third, you know, that's the chakra of Uranus. So Uranus wants higher chakras. You know, let's be spiritual. Let's be smart. Let's, you know, be involved with the higher worlds. And Pluto is, before you go high, you need to come down, visit me, because this root system is not going to be nourished if I'm not happy. So Pluto touches what? If we compare this to our chakra systems, it has to do with survival, has to do with connection to the power of incarnation. And when you are in balance, when you work on your lower world and you work on your higher world, what happens? When you are in balance, then your heart center opens. There are 3 chakras going up, there are 3 chakras going down, and there's the middle chakra, which is the heart center. That's right in the balancing spot. So without one or the other, you're either stuck on a cloud. And so people who are very Uranian and are in their higher self can be, like somebody said, spiritual bypasses. They can have all the knowledge in the world, but they don't know how to apply it. They can't be here in this world. They're frustrated. They can't be in their body. They have health crisis all the time. They suffer from neurosis. Or you can have, the gurus who talk to you about unconditional love and then manipulate your finances and want your money. So they don't walk their talk. So that you see a disintegration between the lower world and the higher world. And Pluto is going to do what if you are that spiritual bypasser who's preaching, the virtues of unconditional love while manipulating you? Pluto's going to expose the sewage. It's going to expose the insecurities. It's going to expose all the shadows that were not dealt with. So, these illustrations capture it. Destruction of the things we thought were valuable. And we realize they are fragile. Pluto is going to make you feel very vulnerable. It's going to humble you that way because you thought you build these cities and you were, with your advanced civilization. But it's going to show you your insecurities. It's going to show you your limitations, that even the most advanced, the most sophisticated, the most powerful have their own plumbing problems. The promise of the butterfly, obviously, very strong Plutonian symbol, and then the Gothic, black dark space, which is about what? What are these people who love this crow and love the spiders and love the snakes? They understand that these animals have a very important purpose, and that you don't only look at the pink and what is physically appealing. You have to look at your own excrement, at your own inner worlds that can be scary, but that's where the truth lies. That's where you can get to things that are hidden. So Uranus wants to gain knowledge by going higher and seeing things from a vantage point. And Pluto is going down to the crevices to see everything that is hidden. Both of them want to expand consciousness. And they have to work together. That's the deal. So when you have a Pluto-Uranus conjunction, as was in the 60s, 65, that's going to be exactly that. The higher world needs to work with the lower world. Now, what is really happening through Pluto? Think about Pluto and Scorpio as a water sign. We talked about Uranus Moon and how Uranus can bring, we'll want to provide explanation, and then we'll want to move on. If you lost your job, Uranus is going to say, well, wait, there's a better one coming. Step out of your funk and elevate yourself. It's an opportunity for an upgrade. What is going to happen with the Pluto moon? What do you think? Any suggestion? Good, deep, yeah. Go declutter your emotions first. Evaluate your emotions. So with the Pluto moon, it takes you straight to the limitations of your own emotions. So you're going to face your grief. And there's not going to be, a bypassing. Pluto takes you there. No more escape. You have to face your insecurities. And what are the insecurities from the moon point of view? Am I ready? Am I safe? So you can have all kinds of situations that make you feel unsafe or unready, or there could be family problems where you now have to face the shadow. You have to face the shadow of maybe there was abuse in your family. Maybe, there was absence and neglect. And maybe, you're a workaholic because you have this deep fear of rejection. Whatever it is, Pluto is going to take you to the emotional body. And by definition, that's how Pluto works. Uranus works through the mental body, but Pluto works through the emotional body. And that's probably the most difficult one to work through. Because the emotions, as we've just established, are slower. And that's where you feel everything. So that's where the suffering is experienced. And suffering is telling you where the limitations are. Because if you suffer, it means something's off. Something's not working. That's exactly why we have suffering. Suffering is like a red light telling you something's not in the right place. It causes pain, needs to be fixed. So the purpose of suffering is to make you aware of the limitations so you can change them and overcome them. But Uranus deals with that on a mental level. Let's find solutions. Let's upgrade the program. Let's download a new software. But Pluto deals with suffering through the emotional body, which means it's a slow and gradual process. But once you're done with it, your emotional body will change. Jenny says, Pluto has made a square to my natal Mars and Sun in Aries. From the 8th house, it's been pain and grief personified over the last 4 years in particular, but I also attest that with Saturn. Yes, both. I mean, Saturn is the dispositor of Pluto at this point. But the important thing with Pluto is that once the work is done, you're working on things on a foundational level. And Pluto will change the vessel itself. And it's going to work through your emotional body. So once the work is done through the emotional body, the soul truly can evolve. The same way, if we use the illustration of the vessel, if you're not working on the vessel, it doesn't matter how much knowledge you pour into it. It's going to overflow. But if you work on the foundation of the vessel, then all the wisdom can be put to use properly. So Pluto works on very deep levels and on much slower processes because, you know, if Uranus is a sports car, Pluto is your old truck that, you know, needs a lot of help. And the emotions are slow. You know, how many times, let's say you see someone who's in an abusive relationship, and you don't know, you know, why are you in this relationship? She's just treating you badly, and she's taking advantage of you. And so the Uranian person comes in and says, look, it's not a good relationship. You're suffering. She's mistreating you. You know, you can do better. Detach, come and I'll show you. But it doesn't help. You know, you can tell someone over and over that they're in an abusive relationship. It doesn't mean that they're going to act upon that right away. Because emotionally, it takes for things to sink in much longer. We need repetitions. We need to experience it. You know, she needs to hurt me on the right side and then on the left side. And then I need to see why I'm allowing this and enabling this behavior. And then maybe at some point, I have enough. Like when I have to go down and down and down through Pluto until I finally realize I can't go any further down. I've hit rock bottom. And now I'm ready. I see it. I see the limitations. I see that I was enabling it. I see that I was feeding my victim role. And wherever your Pluto is where that insecurity is going to be. You know, if you have Pluto in the 12th house, it's existential. It has to do with the feeling of victimization. So that's where all the shadow work needs to happen. Why were you a victim? If it's in the 3rd house, it's going to have to do with your mental insecurities. Right? If it's in the 2nd house, it's going to have to do with your physical, you know, money, body, survival, self-worth. So the soul evolves through the emotional body. So it doesn't matter all the work you do on the mental, all the work you do on the spiritual. If the work's not done on the emotional level, it's not going to be integrated. So Pluto has a very important role evolve the emotional body. So the moon is our emotional body. You know, that's where, like we said, that's the container where everything is processed. But Pluto is going to challenge the moon. It's going to challenge our emotional body so that we may grow, so that we may develop ourselves in a way that is sustainable, in a way that will actually be integrated. And then you're going to see this person is going to become spiritual in a real way, no bypassing. And they'll know grief. They'll know vulnerability. They won't just preach you unconditional love, because they will know what it means to lose. They will know what it means to lose trust, to be taken advantage of. So it doesn't mean that Pluto has to bring suffering. You know, it will bring whatever is necessary, but it brings that dose of truth. And if you are a therapist, if you're an astrologer, you know, Pluto can be very helpful for you because you're ready to ask questions. When is it the most painful? It's when you don't want to look, when you prefer to deny, when you want to win more time. But if people are already, you know, conscious about their own processes and are willing to examine themselves more deeply, they will make good use of Pluto. So obviously Pluto has to do, you know, with therapy, with loss and renewal, and of course, endings. Now, why is Pluto related to death? Most of us are going to say because something needs to end in order for the new self, like the butterfly, the caterpillar has to give in order for the butterfly to emerge. But it's not completely true. Because what Pluto is actually doing through the transformation and the shadow work, Pluto is actually constantly trying to push death away. Now, remember, Pluto is the higher octave of Mars. Mars is your energy. How much, you know, it's your battery. How much energy you have for this life. How much vitality you have, how much fuel you've got. And so Mars goes, does, you know, fends off predators, wins battles, and then reaches a point of exhaustion. My battery's dying. And I'm, you know, my job, my health, something is declining. And then Mars reaches Pluto to a point where I'm about to die. And Pluto says, if you change and transform, if you're willing to do the work, you'll get a second lease. You'll get a new contract. And not only are you going to continue, but you're going to continue better. I'm going to turn you into a butterfly. You are a caterpillar now, up to now. And yes, you could die if you're not going through the transformation. So the caterpillar didn't really die. He just transformed and he pushed death away. So through Pluto, you have those changes, which you can call deaths. But what you're really doing is that you're doing everything to get more fuel, to get a new boost. It's like, you know, your heart stopped and you get an electric shock to revive your heart. That's in a way what Pluto wants to do. So in a way, Pluto is here to extend your lifespan and get you more fuel. This is why it relates to power. How are you going to power yourself through this next phase? And remember, you go down, but then you rise higher than the places you descended from. There's a gain in the process. So Pluto, you know, has to do with anything that can give you power or loss, magnetism. You know, nobody wanted to be with you, and now everybody wants to hire you because you're doing it differently. You know, when I first started my astrology studies, everybody thought I was, you know, insane or that this was stupid. And then, you know, the astrologer keeps doing the work and believes in it and goes deeper and finds out new truth and blossoms into a productive speaker and whatever it is. And then you feel like, oh, I have meaning in my life. And I can be successful. And so Plutonian people, or wherever you have your Pluto, you can start there as the ugly duck, as, you know, the insecure and feeling, you know, misunderstood or unseen or, you know, not in your power. But as you keep working on it and as you keep digging, eventually, you know, this black duck turns into a swan. And that's the promise of Pluto. So you suddenly, your magnet works and you can attract, you know, appreciation, you can attract opportunity, you can attract higher realization. You know, you prepare your vessel for Uranus, and Uranus brings you all these new developments, upgrades. So, you know, that's a very important understanding that Uranus and Pluto have to work together. Now, if we look at transits, I'm going to just for one moment get to my software. So, you know, we had recently Pluto square Uranus. And I believe that was in 2010, 2011. Let me double check. So here, this is 2010, and you see the planet Uranus in Aries, Pluto early Capricorn. So there was a first, what we call a first quarter square. And it became, I believe, exact later that year. yeah, into 2011, the conjunction became, you know, further and further tighter in orb. What happened in 2011 in the world? This was the time of one of the events. Many events happened. There were many revolutions on the planet. In the United States, you had the whole Occupy movement and people protesting Wall Street and protesting, you know, the corporations. And you had Occupy everything. But you also had the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring, which led to a very, very intense revolutionary movement in North Africa, starting in Tunisia, and then spreading to Egypt and Libya and Syria and the Arab Gulf, Arab Peninsula. What happened in the Arab Spring? It all started with one fellow who felt frustrated because he was, you know, the police confiscated his merchandise because he didn't have a permit, and he burned himself, self-immolated in front of the Tunisian parliament, and that was the spark. And he was an Aries, so there was a spark. And that spark basically ignited everyone to start protesting. And in no time, you had regimes that were there for years and decades, falling apart in a matter of weeks. You know, Tunisia, the regime fell. Libya, the regime fell. Egypt, the regime fell. And to this day, there's a civil war in Syria that started from the Arab Spring. So, how can we analyze this from a Pluto Uranus perspective? What happened from a Pluto Uranus perspective? Think about the speed, how quickly the regime were toppled, and how idealistic the movement was for democracy, for reforms, for change in the constitution, for upgrading Uranus, upgrading the conditions for all citizens. And you had this poor person who's, you know, who lost his only possession, were confiscated by the regime. So the level of misery, the level of the persecution was tremendous. And then you have this massive, quick movement happening. And so Uranus did the job. Uranus was in Aries and the spark was lit. And it started to, you know, catch like wildfire. And everybody got scared because Uranus was in town and was shaking and would not accept the status quo. We need an upgrade. We need better conditions. We need to elevate the standards. And so it happened. But what was the problem? Is that once power was removed, there was a vacuum. The Pluto work was just starting. So the square between Pluto and Uranus created a discrepancy in the process where change happened without fully being integrated. And as you create a vacuum of power, you remove an old leader, and there's not enough preparation, there's not enough groundwork, there's not enough true transformation at the piping level, at the foundational level. You're going to build, these tall trees that don't have deep roots. And what happens is that during the vacuum of power, then you have anyone who wants the power, who wants the seat, is going to try to grab it. And that's when you have parasites coming in. And, somebody said maybe, it was caused by the USA. But that's part of it. That's also part of the vacuum, that when the transformation is not really going to the foundation, then anyone can come in and roll the dice and manipulate the situation. And so you ended up having nothing to replace the regime, nothing valuable, nothing that you're really looking forward to. And that led to a situation in some of these countries, especially Libya, where it was worse than the initial dictator, Gaddafi. So that's what happens if you don't do your work on an emotional level and you want fast change on a Uranian level. You're going to have a crisis where the Uranian change is not going to be integrated. And it may be the mess, the best thing you want for yourself. But if the roots are not there to support it, if the underworld is not nourishing and feeding that tree, it will crash. And so that complex relationship between Uranus and Pluto, they're both game changers, they're both revolutionaries, but in a very different ways. And if there's no dialogue between them, and as you understand, they hate each other, so to speak. Uranus looks at Pluto, at this disgusting little blob that, stinks. And Uranus is so educated and so refined. And Pluto looks at this snob that thinks he knows everything, but doesn't really value who's actually feeding his roots. So there's a natural power struggle between them. 9/11, there's definitely elements of that. Now, what are the dates of Pluto-Uranus? The last conjunction, the cycle we're still in, started in 65 in Virgo. The one previous to that was in Aries in 1851. And so you can go and track those historical movement. Obviously, the 60s were tremendous. Now, what happened to this in the 60s? So much change. You had civil rights movement in the United States. You had the sexual revolution. We went to the moon. All this stuff. So let's talk about the sexual revolution. A lot of idealism, wanting, to change the norms. That's the beginning of the feminist movement really gaining more traction. But what happened to all the hippies that did not do the real groundwork for free love? They wanted the freedom of Uranus without having the emotional foundation to really be exploring sexually. So you had this movement of freedom and emancipation and wanting to change the norm that Uranus brought, but it was not emotionally integrated, and it led to a backlash. That's what Pluto created, it's a backlash. So people were not really intimate. You know, they had sex with everybody, but they didn't have the emotional container to expose their vulnerability, to be really intimate. It was fake intimacy. It was rushed intimacy. And it wasn't sustainable. It didn't last. Let's look at September 11, just for sometimes around 8 in the morning. Doesn't matter really. We're looking at fast-moving planets. That's not it. You have to write the dates the American way. So Uranus is in Aquarius, you know, and so talk about speed, talk about, you know, the twin towers going so high, and you know everything is happening through the plane. So it's a very Uranian wound that happened through 9/11. And it's interesting, there was a grand trine in air signs, right? And you think grand trines aren't necessarily auspicious. Depends who you ask. And so what is the aspect between Pluto and Uranus? Pluto, it's a 71 degree aspect, which is a septile. A quintile or a septile? It's a quintile, which is an aspect of truth. You know, it kind of has that quality of revelation, the 72 degree aspect. And so, you know, you definitely see a Pluto-Uranus event through, you know, the other different aspects, because obviously the big trigger for that was the Pluto-Saturn opposition. And in Sagittarius, Gemini, which are ideological, cultural signs, and obviously the whole conspiracies, you know, every Pluto-Saturn cycle is going to bring a lot of shadow that has to do with Saturn, government, legislation, systems. So, you know, was it an inside job and so forth? All the weapon, you know, the non-existing weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, all that's Pluto-Saturn shadow work. But as far as the, you know, wanting to do things too quickly without foundation, fast change without true emotional integration, that's a Pluto-Saturn affair. So that's, you know, that's the, in a nutshell, if we may say, that's Pluto-Uranus for you. And their cycle is 6 to 2 between 113 to 141 years, because Pluto's orbit is not regular. So the cycle is not the same amount of years. It fluctuates between 113 and 141 years. Any questions so far? So let's complete with Neptune. I wanted to show this other illustration about Uranus. So that's when you don't have Uranus in your chart. You just see what's in front of you. And that's when you have arguments, because you don't have perspective. So Uranus, as it lifts you up to gain perspective, you suddenly have a unified field, and you know, everyone can agree. It's an elephant. So Neptune was discovered 19th century, 1846, in Europe. Neptune, named after the gods of the seas, Poseidon in Greek. But, you know, as a ruler of Pisces, even though Neptune rules the seas and it's also associated with oceans, it doesn't capture fully, you know, the myth of Poseidon. There's more to Neptune than the, you know, the traditional archetype of the god of the sea. We'll get there. So what happened at its discovery? First of all, understand what Neptune represents, because then you'll understand what happens during the discovery. If we saw Uranus and Pluto, you know, the god of the underworld and the god of the sky, trying to work with each other, tearing each other apart, and working at very different rhythm. One is very slow, the other one's very fast. Where is Neptune in all this? Neptune represents the reason why we want to evolve our consciousness in the first place. So in a way, Neptune is the goal. Neptune is the truth, that which is timeless, that which is beyond culture. It's not about Australia or America or black people or brown people. It's everything. It's what is beyond time, it's beyond race, it's beyond space. So through our transformation, or if we evolve our consciousness, we're basically getting closer and closer to Neptune. That is, you know, our purpose. Now, is Neptune enlightenment? It's part of it, but Uranus is enlightenment, because Uranus is, you know, the realization. It is the awakening of your consciousness. It's the illumination. But your soul is enlightened. The process of enlightenment is Uranian, but the content, you know, what you're really fusing with is Neptune. So Neptune operates beyond time and space, because Neptune represents everything in life that was here before you were born, before we became who we are. Now, if it represents the oceans, think about the fact that we, you know, what is the ocean? It's the womb. It's like you know, when your mom was pregnant, you were in the ocean of your mom. Water has to do with creation. Water is insulating. It protects you. You know, protects you from the temperature. It protects you from any kind of just, you know, anything that is threatening your existence. So it's a buffer, and it's nourishing you as well as protecting you. So see this analogy of the ocean representing the womb of life, the womb of the cosmic womb. And the cosmic womb where we all come from, where everything really began. So when you are in the womb, just like a baby is in the womb, they're just sitting there. And there's an umbilical cord that feeds them. And the mom is doing all the work. And she's paying the bills, and she's eating the food, and she's breathing the air, and she's sleeping. Everything that she does is going to support the baby. And the baby's just sitting there because the baby's not ready. So the same way with Neptune, we feel that there's a larger consciousness, there's a larger force of creation that takes care of us and that provides for us. And we just need to be, and that's it, that's enough. You know, Neptune represents all the things in life you did not create, everything in life that happens, whatever you do. You know, it starts with your own body. You eat food. Do you know what your liver does and what your stomach does? It's just doing it. What you do is you eat and you eliminate, and you have fuel for, you know, a few hours. You don't ask yourself, you know, will there be enough oxygen in an hour for me to breathe, unless you're in a very compromised situation. But that's not a question that comes to mind every moment. You just take for granted that there's oxygen. Where does it come from? I have no idea. It's there. And I breathe it. I'm not asking myself every time I go to sleep if the sun will rise tomorrow. I know it will. And I know that my life depends on it. Should I be worried? You know, is there someone that's going to turn the wheels to lift the sun at the right time? Who's responsible? So Neptune takes care of it. It allows you to sleep. What happens when you sleep? Sleep is Neptune, it's Pisces. When you sleep, you trust. You let go of your brain, you let go of control, and you're very vulnerable, just like a baby in a womb. Just like a baby in the womb, you know the sun will warm your day, and you don't have to worry about it. You know, most likely it's going to show up, and you don't have to do a thing about it. So all these things that happen naturally, that sustain us, but we have absolutely no control over, or at least not yet, are part of this because it relates to that feeling of being in the womb. Now, what happens in the womb? We're all there, and we all came from there. So when I speak about oxygen, does oxygen care if you're black or white or Australian or what your passport is? It's oxygen. It's free for everybody. The sun is there for everybody. It rains on everybody. We all walk on the same earth. So Neptune represents that which is provided, and it's provided for everyone on the same level. So there's an element wherever we have our Pisces, wherever we have our Neptune, sorry, there's a level of trust. And there's a level of passivity. It's not up to me. It's just going to happen. Divine providence. ask, ask the universe, it's going to provide. So Neptune represents the larger forces, because if I say the sun's going to rise and there's going to be enough air for everyone, is it just random? Or is there an intelligence behind the fact that there is oxygen and that it's just enough to sustain us? And to have, it also ages us as we oxidize. But one of the things about Neptune is that it dissolves your individuality. We're all one. We all breathe the same air. We're all under the same sun. And we all want to be happy. We all want to be healthy. So all these things we all share is part of the Neptune mechanism. This is why through Neptune we can identify with people that are not our family. How can I relate to even an animal? Because I know that animal, just like me, wants food, wants to be healthy, and wants to be safe. So even though they look different and they act different and they don't speak my language, I can identify. So what are we basically saying is Neptune dissolves all differences because it dissolves time and it dissolves space. So it dissolves individuality. What if one moment, think for a moment that you remove time and you remove space. What's left? I'm asking you. Avoid, yes. Consciousness, nothing. Think about it this way. If you remove time and space, everything happens everywhere for everyone always. Everything is happening everywhere simultaneously. There's no separation. So you have a totality. You experience totality immediately. What does that tell us? That time and space separates. You have one time, then another time, then it's 3, then it's 4, 5. So time and space create fragments. We are now in a workshop, then we're going to eat, then we're going to sleep, then this, then that. We separate. But if you take time, we're going to eat, sleep, talk, be, die, born at the same time. You're going to experience totality instantaneously. Whoa, how can we cope with that? We can't. That's why we need time and space. Because Neptune represents the totality. And if you have totality, you need a vessel that can hold that space, which our vessel is too small for totality. We need drips, we need, drop by drop. The work of Pluto Uranus is getting us to get more Neptune in, but still we need time and it's progressive. So imagine that you would have totality right in your vessel right now, you would drown. or you would short circuit. You know, it would be too much. You wouldn't be able to integrate it. So that's why Neptune doesn't fully belong to the material world, because Neptune, it operates beyond time and space, and it's another dimension altogether. We go in and out of Neptune. We can't stay there forever, for too long, because it's totality. But all of us remember, consciously, unconsciously, remember the womb. Remember a time where we were in that totality, where we were one. And that's a part of us that remembers unconditional love, that remembers justice, that remembers truth. Because if you were not there, how would you know that there's a truth? How would you know that there's love? Because deep down, that's where you come from. So what does that mean in our chart? Wherever we have Neptune, we struggle in the material world. We struggle with time, we struggle with boundaries, we struggle with schedules, because that's a place where we want to go, to the timeless. We want to go back to the womb. Can we go back to the womb? We can't. Right? You can't go back to mommy's womb. You're too big now. You won't fit in. The way's forward. But there is something about the womb that helps you remember your origin, where it all began, before your birth. So wherever you have Neptune, you can also feel like you don't fully want to be here. You know, this body is kind of caging me. And I don't want to have to deal with bills and struggles and suffering. Talk about Pluto. Neptune is in the womb. Is there suffering in the womb? No, I'm taken care of. There's love. There's support. There's no war. We're all one. There's no difference. Neptune doesn't understand suffering because it doesn't understand separation. So this whole thing about having an ego and doing stuff and immediate gratifications, it's completely out of Neptune's realm. Like, what the hell do these people do? And why do they hurt each other? Doesn't make any sense. So there's innocence in Neptune. There's a sense of innocence, just like this purest baby trusting the universe and not being able to fully understand what this earthy plane wants from me. So, with Uranus Pluto, we wanted change. We wanted more. We wanted higher. We wanted more power. Neptune is exactly the opposite. Neptune says, the less you do, the better you're at. So be passive. Don't intervene. From a Neptune point of view, the more you do, the more damage you cause. So leave it to God. Leave it to the universe. I would rather just go back on the beach naked, eat from the fruits of the tree, and drink from the stream. I don't need gadgets. I don't need airplanes. I want simple. I want pure. I want my innocence back. I don't want to be incarnated. So, is what's you will see in every spiritual book. They're going to tell you, let's go back to the source. Let's overcome your ego. Let go of your attachments. It's all causing so much suffering. What are they telling you? Give up free will. Free will is a disaster. Causes pain, causes mistakes. In Neptune world, there's no free will. It's all fate. It's all taken care of. You don't have choices, and it's easier. So wherever we have Neptune, we strive to reclaim our innocence. And that's why we do so much stupid things. That's why we're easily fooled, because we want to trust and we want, that place of that is beyond suffering, that where suffering doesn't exist. But there's a higher quality to Neptune. Yes, we want to reclaim our innocence because that's so comforting. And nobody likes suffering, let's admit it. So why do we have this suffering business? And why do we have free will? And why do we have to have more power and grow and transform? Because that's also part of fate. That's part of all that I'm talking about now. You'll see, if you read the Neptune book, it's all the work I've done explaining this archetype, which is really the foundation of our consciousness. So I encourage you to re-examine it or to examine it again newly if you don't have it. Now, Neptune represents the fact that we want to go back to innocence, but at the same time, we have to accept the forces that are beyond our control. We have to accept the good things, but also the difficult things. We accept that the sun rises, whether we do it or not. We accept that there's rain gonna fall and it's not in our control. But then we ask ourselves, who made time and space? And who gave us an ego? And who gave us free will? And who gave us a will to begin with? Isn't that also part of a cosmic providence? We didn't choose to have an ego. It's actually a burden. Life would be easier without it, but we don't have a choice. We don't have a choice. We had to be born and come here and descend from the cosmic world into the material world. What's the big lesson with Neptune? Is to accept your life, to accept the package, everything that's in it, the good, beautiful flowers and the thorns and the predators and the biting insects. It's all there for a reason. And if you trust the universe, you'll accept the challenges as well. You'll accept the thorns as much as the gratifying experiences. So there's a lot of naivete, there's a lot of innocence with Neptune, but there's also the highest spiritual frequency. Because once you accept to descend, you accept to be here, you can finally make peace with your life and stop fighting your own incarnation. So whatever transit you have of Neptune, like we said, it kind of clears your mind and your attachments and your convictions and any kind of individuality, and it reminds you of the big picture. It reminds you to clean your vessel and to receive something of a higher nature that will inspire you. But it's a void. So, you know, you are not safe in the sense that it's not familiar to you. That's a spiritual test. So if we look at the illustration for Neptune, you know, you have this infinity spiral, it keeps going on and on. Then you have this lion and the fawn, where, you know, there's no hostility, there's no predator and prey. We're all on the same boat. Then the wave, what is this surfer doing? The wave is just there. Can you fight the wave? Can you punch it? Can you try to control it? No. Just flow with it. And once you flow with the wave, it's going to take you far at high speed with minimal effort on your side. I mean, yes, you need to swim to get there, but the wave is doing the whole work of pushing you, propelling you forward. So all of nature's resources, all that is provided freely, is part of it. But is it free or is it work? Then you have this temple here where the nature is reclaiming it. It's abandoned buildings. So that's Neptune. Is the moment you let go, nature takes over. You go back to the beginning. You go back to the original design. Free hugs, what is that? It's not very inviting, even though it's free. And that's Neptune when you trust and you don't pay attention to the predators. Blind trust, naivete, loss of innocence are all Neptunian experiences. Why do you experience that? Because you don't want to be here. And so you don't want to discriminate. You don't want to pay attention. You don't want to consider suffering. You want to be taken care of. And you pay a price for that. What is this street about? It's very unsophisticated. You know, it's very simple, dirty, going with the flow. Whatever, you know, whoever's present shows up. It's a mishmash of life. You have the young and the old and the rats and the humans all together. And it's very Neptunian to kind of have this melting pot and no real control. Like, it's not tidy. Neptune is very messy. So if we look again at the cycles, Neptune Uranus is a 2-to-1. Neptune is taking twice as long. It's a 170-year cycle between the two. Then you have Pluto Neptune, 3-to-2. 3 Neptune for 2 Plutos. 500 years, 494 years. The last Neptune Uranus was in 93. The last Pluto Neptune was in 1891. So we don't have time to get into the full extent of these cycles. As I said, we can spend many days going over this material. But here's an illustration of Neptune. You know, Neptune is the innocence, it's the beginning, it's the womb. So you see from this rocks, from the lava, flowers coming out. And you can say that's also Aries, you know, it's the spark of life. But Neptune is the raw elements, you know, it's the chaos of creation. And then you have the future, you know, Uranus is the future, whereas Neptune is it's before time. It's the beginning before even time was created. So you see the difference between them. You can also remember Uranus as the science, the mind, versus Neptune, the spirit. So when you have Uranus and Neptune together, you have to unite science with spirit. And here's another illustration. You know, the Neptune doggy is just, you know, a wild dog who's dirty, full of fleas, but has a strong immune system and finds food wherever it is, you know, whether it's a fallen apple or whether it's a piece of trash. It's just getting by, you know, it's that non-ambitious. I'm just going with the flow. I'm just being. I'm not fighting. I'm not trying. And then again, this building that is abandoned and reclaimed by nature, which is a bit of our lives. You know, if we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't take a shower, if we don't, you know, repaint our walls, Neptune's going to come and create cracks in the walls and, you know, bring dust and spider webs, and it's going to reclaim itself. On the other hand, Uranus is civilization and progress and the future. And let's make things better and higher. Now, this little doggy is really well taken care of. And, you know, we flatten its nose so it's not as intrusive. And you know, it's beautiful fur and nice little hair gadget here. So obviously it's an exaggerated example, but it gives you that contrast between simplicity, neglect, free flow, and innocence versus, you know, our ambitions, our goals, our need to reach the sun, to become the sun ourselves. So this is an illustration of when Pluto entered Neptune's orbit. This was between 79 and 1909. So between 19 Libra and 10 Sagittarius, Pluto was at its fastest as it was closer to the Earth than Neptune was. Okay, so I won't go into all of those cycles. I'm another time. If you have questions, feel free to email me and to write now in the chat box. Otherwise, if you're inspired to learn more, check my website. There are courses, partial courses, or a full diploma course to help you really dive deep into this material. So, Heloise, just wonder about the precession of the ages and your thought on the Aquarius age. So, yeah, I mean, it's a whole discussion, but technically speaking, if I want to go do it quickly, because it kind of touches on the Uranus Neptune. So we were in the Pisces age, and we're gradually transitioning to the Uranus age. So think about the fact that an age won't transition from one day to the next. It's an overlap. As one fades, the other one increases. So I don't believe anyone that will tell you, it starts on December 21st, 2020. I think that's simplistic. However, what is it about? Think about the Pisces age and all the culture that was developed during the past 2,000 years, from Christianity, Buddhism, Islam. Big religions emerged in the Pisces age. And what did they teach you? They taught you not to be attached to the material world. Jesus told you to transcend. And Jesus told you that if you suffer here, you're going to be rewarded in the kingdom of heaven. And to love everybody, that whole concept of unconditional love. So very much a Piscean reality of surrender your ego for a larger purpose. And the Buddhists did that. I'm obviously simplifying and going quickly, but there's also that concept of samsara, of non-attachment, how attachment leads to suffering. And Islam is the same, the sacrifice, the spiritual, the sexual temptations, and the need to love God above all. And all these, what the Pisces age taught us was to understand that there is one higher unifying truth. That there's something beyond your next TV and your next material possession. That there's a deeper and higher unifying force. But the problem of the Pisces age is that it separated flesh and spirit. And it separated us from our own earth. The non-attachment approach. And what happens with the Aquarius age, and always remember that you're living in the southern hemisphere, so whatever is in the spring of the northern hemisphere is going to be opposite the spring of the southern hemisphere. So as Pisces rises in the March equinox, Virgo rises in the September equinox. So the southern hemisphere represents the spring of September, which is Virgo for the Pisces age, and it's going to be Leo for the Aquarius age. Does that make sense? So quickly, if we move into the Aquarius age and the Uranian principle, it's about how we don't go to heaven and leave the earth to go to heaven, but it's how we bring heaven down to earth, and how we basically are able to elevate our lives down here and take leadership Peter is asking about the Pluto-Uranus square of the 30s and the current Pluto-Uranus. We're now moving away from the square. You know, the square was in the 2010, 2015. But there's definitely, you know, a lot of what I was saying is, on the one hand, the need for fast change and the backlash. Because what is the fascism and the totalitarianism and all the dark forces of the system? Part of it, you know, is a reaction to freedom. It's the reaction to emancipation. So in a way, like I said, if you go too quickly with Uranus, Pluto is going to bring the demons. Pluto is going to expose the darkness. The same thing happened with the Soviet Union. You know, in 1917, they had their revolution to bring equality for everybody. And of course, it was a Uranian transit, as well as other transit, but Uranus was very strong. And the idealism of freeing people. But again, because of the vacuum of power, because of the you know, there was something not ready, you had Stalin taking over Lenin. And from a very idealistic movement, it became a very dark movement of control and suppression and, you know, the dark Plutonian forces, you know, taking over because of the vacuum. So these are some thoughts. I hope this gives you food for thought. I know it's a lot of material, but hopefully enough to spark your interest and continue researching and studying. So thank you, Kate and Neil.
Hi, Maurice. Oh, thank you,
Thanks,
Neil.
Maurice. Thank you, Maurice. That was fascinating. Well, I found some of the comments you made. Let's say, for example, you're talking about the when you're talking of Neptune and how we, you know, we just eat and we excrete and there's all this magic goes on inside.
Yeah.
It's interesting from a scientific background. Neptune rules chemistry and biochemistry, and even you're saying, I wrote down your quote: Neptune is the chaos of creation. Well, that's like the stars exploding to give the elements, and then all this magic that goes on inside the body. The processes that go on inside the bodies were digesting food and storing energy. You know, it's just unbelievable what's going on. And the speed it's going on at is just uncanny. You could, you know, it's just bizarre. I love the little comparison of Uranus and Pluto. Uranus being the snob and Pluto being the blob. I thought that was brilliant. Because you could easily see how they both could then have trouble getting on with each other.
Yeah.
Be interested to see what takes place when they get into the sextile, which is going to come up in several years' time, you know, all in early degrees.
They're going to be in a trine.
Aquarius and Aries at the same time. Be very interesting. Everything's happening at the same time there, so be very interesting, I think. Yeah, oh, it was fascinating.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting too. You know, when you're saying with Neptune, it is like this oneness of everything. And then, of course, you talked there briefly of communism coming in with you know, with Lenin and Stalin and so on. Marx's manifesto was actually published almost exactly when Neptune was discovered and went into Pisces. It was within days of then. And of course, that was this idealistic thing. But the trouble is then, beg pardon?
Marx was born with a Uranus-Neptune conjunction.
Yeah, yeah.
And here you see in 2026, you know, I think that's what you were referring to.
Yeah.
2026, you have Pluto moving into Aquarius, Neptune in Aries, and Uranus in Gemini. And so they're forming this trine and sextile.
Yeah. Should be fascinating. Yeah.
I mean, we often talk about cycles when we have two of them meeting. Either Uranus Pluto or Neptune Pluto or this or that, but having all three of them aligned is rare.
Yeah. Yeah, should be very interesting. Yeah. So, look, thank you so much again for coming in on this special day for us, a Christmas party day. But I hope it will be possible for you to get over to here next year, and maybe, if not in body, then maybe in a similar way.
Absolutely. I mean, it would be my pleasure to work something out.
Yeah. And I certainly would encourage everybody to have a look at. There's a lot of really interesting little small courses. If you don't want to do the whole thing, you can look at particular topics. It looks great. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, part of the value of this is to understand the concept and then to bring it to practical application. So it's a very unique program in that we go deep into those discussions and those more philosophical and spiritual essences, but then bring it to a place where how do we actually help someone who needs to buy a house or
yeah.
So
great. So
I'll just unmute everyone, and if we could all just show our appreciation for Maurice's commitment and time for us today, because I'm sure with all the wonderful comments coming through, which I'll do a selection of, I'll cut and paste them into a document for you, Maurice. And so I'm just going to go bang with everyone, and hopefully it works. So maybe not. So thank you. And
thank you so much.
Thank you, Maurice. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
all right.
Thanks, Maurice.
Thank you,
you so
Maurice. And
Take good care of
Betty and Kate.
Take good care of yourselves. Stay healthy. And
Yep.
Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year, and most importantly, I would really inspire you to mark the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on December 21st.
Yes.
Celebrate it.
Yeah, very much so.
Please
Yeah.
go and watch it.
Yep.
Merry
So
Christmas.
thank you, and I will be watching it, and just kept all my dates for it. Thank you. Absolutely great talk, Maurice. And I listened to your other one on video that you sent on email, which was fantastic.
Beautiful.
So, and what I'd like to thank the committee as well and wish everybody a great Christmas and an even better New Year. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to be that hard to make it better.
Yeah.
Talk about going down and hopefully going up again.
Yeah, we're doing well here. Hopefully we'll all be meeting again in the early part of the new year. Yeah.
Let's have some.
We'll hold that thought.
Very enlightening on my personal chart, your talk today. I kind of saw things that I hadn't seen before in it. Yeah, so that's great.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, that's good.
So it's almost mid-11 here.
Yeah.
Right. Getting to bedtime.
Yes.
I'll let you go.
5
Yeah.
o'clock here.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
So thank you to everyone. I'll say goodbye
Signing off, everyone.
and
Bye.
salute everyone for all the work they've done.
Thank you. Thanks, Yvonne. Thanks, Kate, for all the
How do I
organization.
get out of it?
Thank you,
How do I
Kate.
get out of
Yeah,
it?
thank you, Kate. Really appreciate what you do.
It's a pleasure. I'm glad that we've been able sort of to keep
actually
everything
don't know how
together.
to-
So it's good. No, Okay, I will. So thanks everyone, and I'm just going to close the meeting down.